Dallas. So, again, another chapter in the Antonio Brown saga that is his tenure in Oakland. Literally has not gotten to the first game without the potential of not even playing for his new team. Now, through the years in Pittsburgh, Antonio Brown was always a character, right? And because he was so successful on the field, people enjoyed that character that he portrayed, whether it's a show or that's who he truly is from a personality standpoint. People enjoyed the Antonio Brown character because the things he would say, how he would play, the things he would do. But eventually, as he became more successful and became more emboldened within that Steelers organization, he started to do some things that turned off some of his teammates, some of his coaches, some of the fans, and even people in the media. That is who Antonio Brown has been through his career. And now you have a continuation of that behavior in Oakland. The difference in Oakland versus Pittsburgh, and people will tell you that the reason it got out of control in Pittsburgh is because it didn't get checked, and it didn't get checked early enough. It was too late by the time Mike Tomlin and the organization and some of the teammates tried to rein in Antonio Brown, trying to change some of his behavior. He was too emboldened. He was too popular. He had made too much money. You couldn't tell him anything. So now it's time for him to leave Pittsburgh, but he wants to get paid. So he does all this stuff, raising all this noise to get out of Pittsburgh to go to a team that he'd rather play for, to give him the money he can be the star he wants to be. And all of a sudden, boom, you get the Raiders willing to do it because you got John Gruden, his second year as a head coach, trying to come back and relive that glory he had as a Super Bowl winning coach. You have Mike Mayock coming out of the TV booth to become a general manager in the NFL for the first time. Both of those men trying to make a splash. The organization itself there in Oakland, with Mark Davis, about to leave the Bay Area to a new stadium and a new market in Las Vegas. They needed a marquee player. They needed a star. They needed someone to bring attention because as presently constructed, no one believes this team is likely going to make the playoffs, right? So what do you have that's going to make us talk about you this season and get us hyped about the next season? It's Antonio Brown. It's the best receiver in the NFL. He is a star on the field, and he can be a star in the media because of the way he plays the game. And so you take those two things and you overlook the potential headaches. You overlook the potential potholes. You overlook the potential problems that could derail everything you were trying to accomplish by bringing him there in the first place. You wanted him to help your quarterback become a franchise quarterback. But if he's not playing, how's that going to help Derek Carr in week 1? If he's not practicing enough during the preseason and training camp, how is that helping Derek Carr and your offense? The helmet issue made a big fuss just to have people talk about him. Then he was an idiot getting to a cryotherapy chamber with no socks or shoes on. So all that leads to him missing practices and workouts. So, Eaves, he's a Pro Bowler. He's an all-pro. He doesn't need all those workouts and stuff, man. He knows what he needs to do for his body. He's got one of the best work ethics in all of football. That is true. But it is the pattern of behavior that tells you something else is involved, and that's ego, and it's being told you can do whatever you want to do for the most part of your professional career. And now it's become an issue. So we're all going to sit here today. You're going to call into the Stephen A. Smith Show today, 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. Or you're going to hit me on Twitter at Michael Eaves, and you're going to say, we all knew this was happening. We all knew this was going to happen. Who didn't see this coming? How did Mike Mayock and John Gruden and Mark Davis not realize who they were signing with Antonio Brown? How did they not know? Right. Everyone's going to say that. So clearly they did know. Clearly they did know. But they thought they could change him, or they thought this situation would be different, or even beyond that, they had a greater goal in mind and they were willing to put up with some minor headaches. What they probably didn't anticipate is that those headaches would be migraines and they would be constant. They would be ongoing. And just when you thought they started to dissipate, another one would come behind it and it would be even bigger than the last one. That is what Antonio Brown has become for the Raiders. A never-ending migraine headache. If you've had a migraine headache, you know how debilitating it could be. It affects everything you do. It affects your ability to drive, your ability to see, your ability to even talk to people, right? Antonio Brown is a migraine for the Raiders right now, and Mike Mayock's like, yo, we need to do something about it. So he is going to prescribe his entire team medication. And that medication is suspending Antonio Brown. It's to get him away from that team through the weekend, most likely. Maybe week 2, we don't know. Adam Schefter, again, just starting to report this news, just learned it moments ago before we came on the air, that after that social media post by Antonio Brown where he posted the picture of the letter that Mike Mayock sent him outlining a second fine that the team had handed down to Antonio Brown, excess of $59,000 or $53,000, pardon me. And then Antonio Brown goes over the top like, oh, this is how y'all trying to treat me. The devil is a lie. Everybody got to pay up, blah, 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 blah. Basically acting like a child, a spoiled child who doesn't like being disciplined. Because how often has he been disciplined? How often has he been checked? How often has he been reminded of what is expected behavior of a professional athlete in a working environment? Now, it's not the same environment you and I work in. We have different rules, clearly. Professional athletes have way more leeway in terms of the things they do because of what they do on the field and how much they get paid, the whole thing, okay? It's different. But even in that world, there are rules. There are expectations. And if you are the Raiders and you are trying to build a culture, a winning culture, get back to it, one that you had for decades, you have an idea of how it should be done and you want it done a certain way. And if the guy is not living up to those expectations, you have to take action. Now, let's go back, though. The Raiders, they were standing by Antonio Brown all the way through, right? With the helmet. John Gruden came out publicly saying, hey, man, personal choice. Guys want to feel comfortable. We're supporting him, da-da-da. He was behind him. He was saying all the right things. Even when it came to the feet, even when it came to the frostbite on Antonio Brown's feet that occurred not because he was doing some off-season excursion climbing Mount Everest, it's because he went to a cryotherapy chamber without socks or shoes or anything covering his feet. John Gruden went out publicly and said that wasn't even his fault. That is how far John Gruden was willing to go publicly to support Antonio Brown. And what did that get John Gruden? It got him a suspended receiver by the name of the same guy he was supporting, Antonio Brown. That's what he was doing. He was supporting his guy publicly, saying all the right things because he knew the value that Antonio Brown would bring to his team. And John Gruden is all about wins and losses right now. That's what he's about. Wins and losses. The quicker he wins, the better it is for his ego. He's got the money. It's not the money. If he fails as a coach, a network would hire him in a heartbeat. He would be back on ESPN 2 days after he was fired or decided to retire, whatever. So it's not about the money for him. It is literally about his legacy and his ego. He's about winning. He knows Antonio Brown can help him do that. But eventually it got to a cost. And Mike Mayock, back on, was it like August 18th, 16th, 17th, something like that, was like, he was starting to get fed up with Antonio Brown. Exactly. You got to be all in or you're all out. One of the two, right? And all of a sudden you get a series of events after that. Boom, he gets fined. Boom, all of a sudden it comes out publicly. Boom, Antonio Brown says something publicly about that fine. And all of a sudden he's starting to isolate himself from the team and things of that nature. And then finally Mike Mayock says, no, can't do it. There are 52 other guys here that we're trying to look after. We've got to nip this in the bud right now. And so going into week 1, the Raiders may not have their best player. Their best player. Not even a question. Their best player may not be able to even play week 1 with his new team. That's where the Raiders are right now after going through all that drama in the offseason to get him away from the Steelers, to pay him that $30 million guaranteed. Speaking of the $30 million guaranteed, we're going to take your phone calls, 888-729-3776. Hit me on Twitter, at Michael Eaves, filling in for Stephen A today on the Stephen A. Smith Show. If he is suspended for conduct detrimental to the team, that could put his guaranteed money in the balance. Yes. The way contracts are constructed, it could be that a suspension would void the guarantees. And so the Raiders, honestly, would be able to potentially cut him at any point and owe him nothing further, if it is indeed suspension for conduct detrimental to the team. Now, you could go back and say, well, how do you prove conduct detrimental to the team? Who couldn't make that case right now? A freshman law student can make that case right now. Hell, a bartender could make that case right now. An accountant, an Uber driver. Anybody could make the case that Antonio Brown has been detrimental to his team through conduct over the last four weeks. Anybody could make that. So he goes through all of that trouble to get out of Pittsburgh, to go get new money from another team and a fresh start and a whole deal, and he acts a fool, and it could cost him his money. Could cost him his money. Because he could be suspended for conduct detrimental, which would void the guarantees in his contract. I mean, they could literally do it right now. They could say, you know what? Forget the suspension. We're cutting him. And he would get like $1 million, I think. Is it worth it if you're the Raiders? Is it worth to just go ahead and cut him? Because aren't you concerned how he might respond after this suspension? Or if you're Mike Mayock, John Gruden and company, Mark Davis, the owner, are you willing to say, you know what? He's never really been checked before. He's never really had the discipline that he probably deserved in the past. So let's give him that wake-up call and see how he responds. If he responds the right way, it was worth that one game. If he doesn't, then we know what we can do. We can literally cut him, and it won't cost us anything, maybe like $1 million. But my question to you is, do you think this wake-up call will work for Antonio Brown? Do you think this is the thing that makes him wake up? Now, depending on where you grew up, I'm going to go out on a limb and say there was one person you knew, either classmate, friend, family member, that was just, as my mama would say, hard-headed. You couldn't tell them nothing, right? They had to experience something for themselves despite numerous people telling them otherwise, that, yo, this is how it should be. This is where you messing up. Stop tripping. Get your stuff together, or you're going to be out of something, out of a job, out of this house, out of the school, what have you, right? Just a straight-up knucklehead, hard head. Can't tell him anything. Antonio Brown is a hard head. He's hard-headed. You can't tell him anything. Because everything in his life that he's overcome told him he wouldn't be successful, right? Where he grew up there in the Miami area, how he grew up there in the Miami area, and all of a sudden, he's a multimillionaire, right? So all the things in his life that told him he couldn't do something, and he overcame those things, then why would he necessarily listen to someone telling him what he can't do? Because sometimes you can't tell the difference between criticism and hate. Sometimes you can't tell the difference between criticism and support. Antonio Brown is hard-headed. You can't tell him anything. He has to experience it for himself. He has to experience it for himself. Is this suspension the wake-up call that he needs, and also the wake-up call that will work? Again, we had Adam Schefter on the program moments ago saying that Mike Mayock got into it with Antonio Brown and that the team is thinking about suspending him for this first game. Source tells ESPN's Josina Anderson that Brown and Mayock got into an argument during Wednesday's practice, and it happened in front of the team. So this wasn't just in the office somewhere or in a corner of the locker room or in the training room, sequestered someplace away. Practice in front of the whole team. Now, again, we don't know how long this suspension will be. 1 game, 2 games, 3 games. But here's some context for you. According to the NFL's collective bargaining agreement, a player can be suspended a maximum of 4 weeks for conduct detrimental to the team. So it's up to the league to determine, it's up to the team to determine how long a player should be out based on conduct that is detrimental to the team. So I asked if this suspension is the wake-up call that Antonio Brown needs. Is 1 game enough? Should it be 2 games? Should it be 3 games? What do you think Antonio Brown needs to change his act? And if you are the Raiders, what are you willing to do to get to that point where he is the player that you needed and wanted in your organization? That's Straight Talk Wireless, everything for less, only at Walmart. So I want to take